Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, and in this video I'm continuing to look at how it came about that the traditional elites ended up handing power to Hitler. Now we've seen in a previous video that they were not fans of Weimar democracy and wanted a return to authoritarian rule. Well, I'm going to take this further. After the November election of 1932, Papen now attempted negotiations with Hitler. The Nazis would join his government, but the most important ministries would remain in non-Nazi hands. But Hitler wanted much more than that. Papen also considered banning the Nazis, as well as the Communist Party, and using the army to enforce a presidential regime. But as he had now lost the confidence of Schleicher, and so the army, this was a non-starter. Schleicher, for his part, was annoyed by Papen's intriguing. Papen had failed to deliver the majority in the Reichstag that was needed, so he was forced to resign. Against the backdrop of a real fear that civil war could break out, negotiations within Hindenburg's trusted inner circle and with Hitler resumed. Hindenburg could appoint a government and rule by decree, but if he was to succeed in manoeuvring Germany back to being an authoritarian state, he still needed the legitimacy that a majority approval in the Reichstag would give him. But this was now the one thing that Hitler couldn't deliver. The Centre Party would support him, so long as he didn't bring about a dictatorship, but nobody else would. Schleicher tried to get Hitler to bring his party into a government headed by himself. But Hitler, after heated discussions with party leaders, decided against. Papen was confident that he could continue to rule by decree and told the president. But Schleicher countered that he thought he could reach an accommodation with at least some of the Nazis, and with support from the Social Democrats and the Liberal parties, he could form a majority in the Reichstag. The president sided with Papen. However, Schleicher used his trump card, the army. A report made by the General Staff, which Schleicher must have commissioned, stated that the army would not be able to both defend Germany's borders and ensure law and order against both Nazis and Communists. With no agreement reached anywhere between the parties or between Papen and Schleicher, but with the army clearly in Schleicher's control, on December the 3rd, the president felt obliged to make Schleicher Chancellor. Schleicher had an outside chance of hanging on to power. The Social Democrats and the Centre Party wanted to save the Republic and the Weimar Constitution. They at least hated him less than Papen and his overtly authoritarian vision. And the Nazis might yet come round to allying with him. They had been weakened by the November election, and there were divisions in the party about how they should respond. Most important of all, there were signs around the world as well as in Germany that the depression was bottoming out, and that the worst was over. There was now intrigue upon intrigue. Hindenburg liked and trusted Papen, and he shared his vision for Germany. He resented the way Schleicher had plotted his fall, while Hitler was being criticised within the party for not compromising more and joining a coalition which he didn't lead. Strasser had been urging Hitler to compromise with Hindenburg, and seeing an opportunity, Schleicher began negotiations with Strasser, hoping he could bring pressure to bear on Hitler that might bring him into a coalition of his own. If not, he hoped to detach Strasser from Hitler and bring him and his fellow left-leaning National Socialists into a coalition with him. He went as far as to offer Strasser the vice-chancellorship and the premiership of Prussia. Strasser had an angry showdown with Hitler and resigned from all his party posts, though not from the party. What's more, he gave his story to the newspapers. It plunged the Nazi Party into a deep crisis. Just as power was within reach and the need to hold a collective nerve was most important, the party was in danger of splitting. However, Hitler acted decisively. He dismissed those he knew supported Strasser from their party posts, and the party held together. The next twist in the soap opera was that Hitler and von Papen held meetings. They were now plotting their own takeover. Both men were in weaker positions than when they last met, and this helped focus the minds of the two men. Agreement was reached that Hitler would head an administration that would include Papen and his supporters, but they must be willing to back Hitler in his destruction of the Social Democrats and Communists, and the removal of Jews from leading positions, as well as the restoration of order. Meanwhile, Schleicher busied himself with the business of governing. But as he didn't have the support of the Reichstag, he needed Hindenburg's support, and he didn't get it. Hindenburg, his son Oskar, who had been close friends with Schleicher, Otto von Meissner, Hindenburg's Secretary of State, and Papen were deep in intrigue themselves. Intrigue that was to involve the steel helmets, the paramilitary force that wasn't tied to any party but was very much right-wing. Should force become necessary? Their concern was that the improving economic situation might save the Republic and Weimar democracy. While there were rumours that Schleicher and General Kurt von Hammerstein, the chief of the army command, were making plans for a coup, which would bring about a military dictatorship. A dictatorship that, whilst it would bring an end to the Weimar Republic and a return to authoritarian government, would leave Hindenburg very much weakened. Papen out of things altogether, and would result in the end of the Nazi Party too. In fact, Schleicher and the army were only considering a putsch if another Papen-led administration was forced on the country, as they feared it would lead to civil war. Meanwhile, Strasser had agreed to join in a coalition with Schleicher and had met with Hindenburg. No matter, Schleicher and his intrigues had brought enough key players together in Hindenburg's circle to convince him that a Hitler-led government was the only way forward. Oskar and Meissner opened the negotiations with Hitler, while Papen worked on convincing Hindenburg that a Hitler-led coalition was the only way of securing a Reichstag majority, so legitimizing their own plans to bring an end to parliamentary government altogether. And be clear, that's what everyone was aiming for. Hitler, he assured the president, would be controlled. As for the army, they were confident that if a Hitler-led administration should happen, they would be able to play their part in keeping him under control. The very institutions that Hitler thought would be necessary to have on his side, the president, the conservative elite, and the army, were colluding to hand him power. Schleicher, accepting that he could not gather a Reichstag majority to support him, tendered his resignation on January the 28th. So, at long last, everything was in place for a Hitler-led government, and in the morning of January the 30th, 1933, that's what Germany got. The Nazis were the biggest party in the Reichstag, and their votes were a result of the Great Depression and the unemployment that came in its wake. And Hitler did a great job organising the Nazi Party, and Goebbels did a great job with propaganda. Yet ultimately, Hitler was helped into power by the traditional elite, who had never wanted the Republic, and who, along with the communists, had never wanted democracy. Now, if you haven't done so already, do please subscribe to my channel and tell your friends about it. But for now, let me thank you for listening and wish you the very best of luck in your studies. Cheers.